Bootstrap Confidential, the podcast where we talk to successful bootstrappers about the playbook for bootstrapping.
Welcome to Bootstrap Confidential, where this episode I'm delighted to welcome Mohit Sagar from OpenGov Asia. Mohit has founded OpenGov Asia just about almost 10 years ago in 2015 and has successfully bootstrapped it to the considerable size it is today. So welcome to the show, Mohit, and thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, Charles, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Not at all. I always want to start with the same question. Obviously, you had a strong background in Terrapin, in Alphabet, in big established, global corporate conference and events businesses. So, what was the Damascene moment? What was the moment where you went, you know what, I'm gonna go and do this by myself for myself rather than like, for other people again?
Fair play. Actually, I think I have a slightly different story than most entrepreneurs will. I
Okay.
was working for the last company called Alphabet, and I came back from I wrapped a very successful year. Yeah, and I was a junior player in that team, and I came back home from delivering an event, if I remember correctly, in Hong Kong on the 2nd of December, 2014, and I found out over LinkedIn, okay, that the guy who I was working for asked me to go. It was not, okay. So literally on LinkedIn, he posted that it's not working out very well between me and Mohit, and I was dropped. So yes,
Wow.
okay. And this note was left outside my door at 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night when I got back. What's interesting is instead of getting angry, I went and I opened my fridge, got a bottle of champagne out, and I corked that open. And I went to bed that night saying, okay, what's next? So the natural thing was go look for a job. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something better. And literally 12 days later, on the 14th of December 2014, I formed CIO Network, which is the parent company of OpenGov Asia. And that was my beginning because I'd taken all what I had learned and I said, yep, this is the moment, a defining moment in life when you have a choice. It was a left turn or a right turn. Go back into the market, easy to get a job, okay, with the experience I carry, or literally, put myself in the deep end. So yes, I took the plunge.
Wow. And did you, I mean, obviously, not a planned moment because obviously, obviously, like a lot of people spend months and months planning before they kind of like leap and like, they build a runway and everything. But from the moment you decided to go it alone, did you go, okay, this is a problem that needs solving and CIO Network will solve it. Did you have a really clear idea of what the problem was, or
Yes.
was it okay? And how did you
Yes and
go about
no.
sort of building the
You
building
know,
the solution?
Right. So the background that I was coming from, and I've had the privilege of working for, like you said, the Terrapins and WBRs, and what you learned was all of these organizations champion in different places in the industry. Right. So the last one was in the public sector. So I just spent quite a bit of time in the public sector now, okay, which means doing events around government. Hence the word OpenGov was formed. I realized that there was a gap over there. The gap was the content that was being delivered, okay, was not coming from me because I was running on the sales side of that business. I saw there was a gap in the content. Furthermore, the delivery of the content, it was very dry and very boring. Okay, so I figured you take all that you've learned, and I picked, I'd say the two, three, four things from each organization that I'd done, which I thought was stunning, amazing. And I said, that's what I'm going to turn around and put in my blender and roll out with that. So, focusing high on customer service, focusing high on content, understanding the technology part, because most people just marry people, you have a buyer and a seller and you put them together. No, let's go deeper with what the seller is selling, but try and understand more so what the buyer really wants. Nobody's asking the buyer. Everybody's selling a product. Well, the product is not what's going to solve the problem. And believe it or not, Charles, that's still happening today. Okay. If I give you a little bit of a background on me, I did my master's back in the States. And what was interesting was when I graduated after my undergrad, there was a financial crisis. I had a finance background. There's no way you will get a job when the market dips that badly. So my university came and said to me, hey, you want to do your master's? We're going to pay for it. You qualify A, B, and C. So I'm like, no, I don't want to study anymore. But it was no choice. So sure. So I rolled into a master's program. What's interesting is I rolled into the first class that was ever offered on MIS, Management Information Systems. It was not based on coding. It was based on trying to get IT to understand finance and vice versa, because the banks at that time had become massive consumers. But
Yeah.
there was a big gap. So just to check this out, I walk into my first class in my master's program, and of the 21 or the no, sorry, of the 18 people sitting over there, 16 were from IBM. Okay, all senior director level over the age of 40. I'm walking there at the age of 21 saying, okay, did I walk into the wrong place? Okay. But I realized, okay, IBM had sent these people to go and learn how to talk to the finance team. Very interesting. That gap still exists in the market today, 2025. And I'm talking about what, 1991, 92. So a massive, massive swing, which just told me that if you do not address the core issue of what the buyer really wants, sellers never, ever come to the right place at the time. Now, don't get me wrong, sales happen all the time. It's relationship selling. It's getting to know people. It's I call it band-aid technology sometimes. Somebody really needs
Yeah.
something to bolt it on. But that's not the pathway. And what's very interesting is in the last couple of years, with the role of AI,
I was about to ask about that because surely that's the opportunity after, as you say, decades, particularly in all areas, but especially in banking of band-aids, being applied again and again and again and again until you've got so many band-aids, you've got, something that's effectively no longer workable. AI surely creates the opportunity to actually re-engineer the entire thing from kind of cradle to grave and address these issues.
spot on. The challenge with that, and I just did an event this morning for the manufacturing industry. What's interesting is they say that the costs are too high. People not realizing that what they've done over time needs to be undone to be now redone again for the new tech that's in the market. You can't keep bolting on things to very, very old technology and keep it running. At some stage, it's going to come end of life. And a lot of the tech is coming to end of life, and the new technology will not talk to the old stuff, as we know in the banks. Same with governments, right? Okay, when they went to the digital transformation journey, it's amazing how they call it digital transformation. It wasn't digital transformation. They were taking a manual paper process and putting it on a digital platform, and they thought they were digitizing the services. They weren't doing that at all. And a lot of the agencies around the region, government, had that same problem. Okay, the
Yeah,
systems
that's
and
so
services,
common. It's so
they don't
interesting because
work.
the last business I built, RFI, which was a research business, effectively that's exactly what we were targeting. That all the big research houses had taken an incredibly laborious human manual process and slightly digitized it, which didn't result in any cost savings, didn't result in any kind of increased efficiencies, any reduction in timelines.
Mm,
There's a fantastic book called the Second Machine Age, the
right.
authors of which I forget, which looks at the advent of digital and technology. It was written before Gen AI, interestingly, but in that they go right back to the Industrial Revolution, and they
Mm,
point out that when electricity was first invented, it didn't as a power source. Nothing happened for almost 50 years. All
yes.
that happened was you had a central source of power, a water wheel or something, and the manufacturing was organized around that central source. And all they did was replace that with the new power. They didn't get any efficiency gains by reorganizing the manufacturing process. And it was literally almost 50 years before someone said, hang on a second, this means we can completely reorganize the manufacturing process to create all these massive efficiency gains in speed and in time and in cost and everything. And that's when the manufacturing industry took off. And they use that as very similar to what's happened with digital over the last 20 years, that there have been some people, particularly perhaps some of the banks, that have just used band-aid technology. And it's like, oh, okay, you don't want to come to the branch, so now we're going to put you onto the laptop, or you don't want to come to the laptop, so now we're going to put you, but it's the same process. It's just a different form and channel. So yeah, it's fascinating what you say. But I want to come back to something you said at the start there. So you're talking about a really, really high focus on delivering an amazing customer experience, which is really key for lots of startups. So how did you go about creating a culture as you built the business to make sure that delivering an awesome customer experience was always front and center?
That's a very, very good question, because when you talk about customer service and delivery, when does that customer service and delivery start? Does it start with the first time you touch the customer when you're inviting him or her to an event? or does it happen at the event, or does it happen, or does it continue all the way after the event? So the few things I learned was we're in the people's business. What do people like? Professional services. And you'll pay for a professional service. Okay. And you'll come back to it over and over again because by the time you leave, let's call it a business engagement or an event, and that's what the other thing I'm changing. I'm going to stop calling our the gatherings that we do an event because the event in my definition as of yesterday has a negative connotation. An event could be a wedding, it could be a birthday, right? So it's not taken professionally. And as of yesterday, and it's amazing, I just wrote that down. Okay, when I was doing my notes yesterday, it's called completely different thing because it should be called a business agenda or a business meeting now. And let me explain why. A customer, when they come in, the first thing we make sure is he or she's comfortable. Yeah, the food and all that stuff is okay. But you know what? It's can you pick them up from their home and drop them to the place where you want to have your business meeting? That's number one. Number two, and we were the first ones to do that, by the way. The second was, hey, can you now take care of me and drop me to my workplace or let's say post-COVID home? Two very different things. Now, when you do that 10 years ago, okay, people turn and said, "Where are you from? Why are you doing this? Why you invest or spending that kind of money?" And I'm like, "Nah, it's the experience that we're creating. People will not forget a good experience. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, you come into an event. My team and I, believe it or not, you want a cup of coffee, we won't tell you at a five-star hotel machines over there. We will go and get you that coffee. We will get you and take you to where you are. Okay. If your plate is finished, we will not tell the hotel staff to pick it up. We'll pick it up. Now, these are stuff that you learn from it. How do you deliver high class service? You start at the most fundamental lower level. Take care in Maslow's hierarchy. You take care of the basic needs first. Then when you hit into the conversation, the content, you give people a chance to talk. We are very big at our events to do that. You create a dialogue where you actually go around the room getting people's opinion. Now, when they do that, they feel part of a conversation. They walk away by saying, do I agree? And you can disagree. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing and having a different viewpoint. But at least you've had the ability to exercise that in a surrounding that's cordial and comfortable. Okay, and you were heard. Now, yes, there will be counters to that. The third is, and it's interesting you talked about research. People take so many notes at these so-called, okay, let's call them events for right now. 90% of the people I realize they leave the piece of paper back
That's so
of
true.
what they wrote, right? 90%. So now you were there in that moment and you've walked right out and gotten into that busy, buzzy world of yours and not sure how much you retain. So we ensure that the post-event report that we generate is very timely. It's detail oriented. It will remind you exactly what we were discussing. And we have been given feedback on that by dozens, hundreds of customers saying, both on the customer side and the delegate side, by saying that report of yours actually makes me think twice and three times, four times. So it's the start, it's at the event, it's post event. You got to key out that the 360-degree circle is what people remember. But the other thing is, even though we do two, three, four events a week, Charles, it's the people that I care about. My people who care about their people. We are the people's
Yeah.
business. We
Which
are, right?
leads me on to my next question. So
Okay.
obviously you're empowering your people, your team to deliver this fantastic customer experience, prior, during, post. How do you find those people? I mean, one of the challenges that most startups have is that, particularly when you're initially getting going, is that anybody you want to employ can generally get a much better wage going to work for a Terrapin or an Alphabet or a WBR, probably less stress and short, and not as long hours. So
Hmm.
how do you go about finding those people, and what sort of people do you look for that you know are going to deliver that really, really incredible customer experience?
The first thing I look for is passion. I'm not looking for only a knowledge base. It's not always about content. It's about passion. Do you love what you do? And there are a couple of things I did back in 2015 when I literally got going. When I started looking for people, I was agnostic to look for people no matter where they were in Asia. Now, in my past jobs, what we would do is we find you in Malaysia, we find you in Indonesia, and then we would bring you into Singapore. I said I will not do that at all. I want you to work from home where you have your family and your kids. I don't want to uproot your family. I don't want them to switch schools. Okay. I don't want your spouse. It could be the husband or the wife trying to find another job. So I've had a work from home culture from day one. And what that did was it made me go after talent no matter where I found it. I was
Okay.
agnostic. I broke that border down. The second thing we did was, okay, and then it's tough. We create a virtual office from day one, which means you log into an office and your camera is on all the time, right? People
Okay.
love that. COVID did not teach us that. We were already there. Okay. And that's what gets you talent that is scared of commuting for an hour and a half. Okay. There could be stay-at-home mothers who suddenly come back to the workplace because they've just given birth. They have a nanny, they've got their family around. Okay. But they can work, but they need to be around. So that proximity. So we've had quite a few players around Asia, ASEAN more so, on our team. And that's what's grown over time.
Okay. That's it. So you must have been, I mean, most people when the pandemic came, particularly for an events business where it's about human contact, um, that was, enormously challenging as a polite way of phrasing it, but
Yeah.
not just maintain, not just keeping the business going, but actually functioning as a business. But you were already set up for that. But if you've got what are some of the challenges then? Because one of the advantages of having everyone in this, you walk into your office and it's a physical office and everyone's there and you've got all that, you've got all that buzz, you've got that energy, you've got all those conversations that are happening around the water cooler, as people like to say, though they generally don't happen around a water cooler in a startup, they happen across the desks. But you've got if you don't have that because everyone's working remotely, whilst I can see the benefits, how do you overcome the challenges?
And spot on, because you're right. You know what? I'm a kind of person who loves to walk into an office. People feed off my energy. I feed off their energy. You get things going. It was challenging initially to try and get people to work remotely, but very quickly you realize there's more than one way to collaborate. There's more than one way. That was a conventional way, which is what we all grew up with. But what's next? I mean, if you think about it, so many companies during COVID said, we will not go back into the office.
Yeah.
Most of those companies have done a 180-degree turn, right? Most have done a 180-degree turn. Okay. The
Yeah.
banks, for example, in Singapore now have to go back into the office, right? So, and organizations are doing that. It's what's very interesting is I've been polling this question since COVID happened. So every event that I do, I ask people, okay, how many of you can continue working from home? First was, how many of you want to work from home at least 3 out of 5 days during COVID? The hit ratio in every country is over 80%. Okay, on an average. As years go by, we start living with COVID again, that numbers are diminishing because the question now is how many of you can work from home and are still working from home? That number, even in Singapore, as of today's poll, my event today, was at 54%. Okay,
Okay.
yes, last week it was at 45%. It's coming down. People are going back to the office. What I'm saying over here is the challenge is how do you motivate people? Okay, it's come down to communication. And if they come into a culture from day one that we have started by saying, guys, we talk this way, our scrums are there every morning still, they're virtual scrums. We haven't stopped that, right? We have, like I said, a virtual office. We have a camera on policy. What's very interesting is people who do come into the office, when they leave the office, in most of the meetings I'm with externally, most people don't have the cameras on. We do. Even if all of our customers have the cameras off, everybody from the OpenGov team will have the camera on. So it's the small things that you do differently. Do I think that we miss out on the face-to-face, the physical, the after office drinks? Yes, I do. That is a challenge, and we do that virtually still. But so that's a trade-off you pay.
Yeah.
You want talent somewhere else. I got people working in New Zealand, for example. I can't have them working in Singapore for so many reasons. But I
Yeah.
got talent sitting all the way there. I got talent everywhere else, and that's what I go after.
And just sticking with the on talent for a second. So obviously, as you said yourself, you have a sales background, and and a marketing background. So when you're starting the business, that bit's easy. The whole go to market because that's your skill, that's what you know. But you've obviously then got significant gaps, and there are two ways that that founders can plug those gaps. They can either go, you know what, I'm gonna go and do some research, do some online classes, go onto YouTube, whatever. I'm gonna work out how to do this. or they can say, you know what, I need to bring in someone who's got some real skills in this area to help build out the competencies of the team. So when you get to that, know what you don't know, which is the route that you took to plug the gaps that you can fulfill yourself.
So it's interesting. The one thing I know about a business is sales and finance. Those are two key elements in any organization, right? You got to get the revenue coming in, and you got to make sure that your books are kept absolutely clean. My very first day in a service office when I walked around that office, okay, looking at all the other services over there, and I found somebody who was an accountant. Okay, the first I sat down with her, I explained her what we were about to do, and I hired her as our external accountant. That lady is still with us after 10 years. She still manages our books. Now, yes, I have an in-house, obviously, after that, okay, but the biggest, you got to understand where your risk is. Your risk is you got to keep your finances in check. Okay, as an entrepreneur, or as a business owner, you've got to have somebody who's keeping track of your expenses because you got to file taxes at the end of the day. That's the most important thing, keeping them right. The second is you must know, like I keep a lot of my information still in my head, believe it or not. I know how much requirement I need for a business on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis. And even though accounts will give me documentation, I know what the business needs. And I live through that. So I do compensate by reading. Okay. I did not go and get external talent for that because I also feel sometimes you don't have the financial resources to get people who have all the skill set. So you outsource that. So and you're not paying them for a full-time job. You're paying them as they're doing their work for you. And that's how I got over that hurdle. Okay. And it is a hurdle, but you got to get over that hurdle. Yes, a lot of reading helps.
And I mean, I would also argue that the other thing is cash. I mean, cash is absolutely king. Making sure that somebody is making sure that trickle of cash, or that hopefully turns into a river, but whatever it does, it doesn't stop flowing. So that you can carry on building and growing. But yeah, that's critically important. But just coming on to, I mean, obviously you've had a huge amount of success, and you operate across the whole region. I'm guessing, I could be wrong here, that along the way you've learned some lessons, you've had some missteps from a product point of view, you've had or from a you've got into a market and it hasn't quite worked. Um, what are some of the lessons that you've learned when things haven't quite gone to plan?
The first 3 years, nothing goes to plan. Okay. That's why nothing goes to plan.
I
It
love it
sounds
when
very,
you see startups and they've got a 5-year plan, and you're like, how do you have a 5-year plan? How do you
you can
even
have
have
a
a
5 year plan.
5-week plan when you're starting a business? But anyway,
Correct. You don't. So there are multiple ways of obviously getting your business off the ground. Okay, debt, you can borrow, right? You can get external investors, uh, or you bootstrap yourself. What I did was I went to three friends of mine and I said, I'm about to launch this business. I want you to invest X amount of equity. And it wasn't that much. I want it on a monthly basis for the next 3 months. I'm going to give you Y amount in return for the equity, but I will give you that equity for 2 years only, and I'll buy you back out again, max 3 years. Okay, and I'll give you a return on that investment if I make profit. So it's all about that, your choice. Uh, you know, I did not spend time going after grants. I did not spend time talking to banks. I didn't do any of that because I've also learned something in life, which is you wanna do something, you sell. Sell gives you cash. Cash, exactly like you said, is king. It keeps the wheels turning. So go after sales. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs are very, very good at product, and they will fall short if they go to sell. And you see that time and time again. The success stories that we read are very few. There's no book written on failures, right?
yeah.
There's no book for the most part, right? And that's the lion's share of all startups. Okay, startups fail very quickly, and nobody writes about that because there's no story to write. Now, the ones that we are reading, they're not telling you about the first 90 days or the first 180 days. They are telling you once they've made it, okay, what principles to carry with you and what keeps it going. But by that time, that's a multi-million-dollar business, and the person
Yeah.
writing the book is a multi-millionaire. But what you want to know, what I think I would have loved to know is what does the first 90 day look like, and the next 90 day for me, because that's where it goes wrong. Because what happens is when you're even selling, your customers are saying yes, I'm buying, but till the time they don't sign the contract and make payment, it's not a sale. Okay, a
Yeah.
lot of people start, corking champagnes because yeah, I got a green light. What does green light really mean? That's an implied need. It needs to become a very explicit need. He or she signs, job is done, especially if you have what's called tier one customers. So luckily, okay, my customer base is tier one IT companies. So once it's signed a document, it's 90%, 99% the bag. Okay, so that's good enough. But the question then is, you've got to keep on going because just because you've got a big organization signed, they will not pay you in 30 days. They will not pay you in
No.
60 days. They will not pay you in 90 days. You're lucky if you get the PO in the first 60 days. Okay. And then that PO could take another 60 days. So your cash flow becomes very challenging here, right? Then you got people who, and organizations do this, they'll give you the PO and they'll make full corrections to it over time, all during their buying time. Okay. And
Yeah.
it's the biggest players to do that, right? So you've got to manage cash in the bank, depending on what your bleed is. And if you have a 6 month runway, you're great. You will never get a 6 month runway when you start off. You're lucky to get a 30-day runway. So, so as you know, what you're doing is you try to always balance what's here, what's required over here, and yes, stress will kick in a big, big way. But if you channel your energy towards sale, sale, and sale, unless you have a massive cash reserve, okay, and that's why businesses fail too, because they got too much money sitting at the back, and they think it's just going to happen. It doesn't happen. Uh, you go after the sale, you go after the close, you make sure your books are correct in terms of when will you get paid, the invoicing. So that chapter you got to keep very, very tight. And for me, that's the success, and it takes time. Charlie, it takes a lot of time for that to happen and become reality.
Yeah, and you mentioned the stress there. So one of the disadvantages, and I often talk to founders about this, is someone coined it last year as founder tourism. And people see these fantastic success stories of Steve Jobs has been feted in the media, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. I mean, entrepreneurs now are rock stars the way they weren't in the 90s. And there are all these amazing success stories of somebody's left and they started an app, and people like think, oh, I'm gonna leave school or I'm gonna leave college and I'm gonna start an app, and 3 months later I'll be a billionaire and happy days. And then they forget that 95% of startups fail in the first 5 years, and then another 50% fail in the next 5 years. So it's a pretty high attrition rate. And they
Mhm.
launch and they suddenly discover, hey, this is actually really, really stressful and it's really exhausting and it's really, really time consuming, which it is. As we know, it absorbs,
Mhm.
it consumes your life in a positive way, but it consumes your life. So how do you cope with that stress? How do you develop resilience to keep going through the exhaustion, through all the stress, through the lows, which are frequent as well as the highs?
That's a solid question. And you're absolutely right. Just when you think things are going to go get better tomorrow, okay, it's called curveball after curveball after curveball, right? And it becomes a domino effect. And let's face it, you will never get one problem at a time. They will all hit you at the exact same time, right? So what are stress coping mechanisms? Okay, one is you work out. Second is you have a drink or two at night, and that's what I do. Okay, and that's the only way. The third is you work even harder. Okay, because at the end of the day, it's the input that you're going to put in there is going to give you the output. But can I just share one more thing? It's
Yeah,
not just the hard work. You've got to understand where the finish line of what you're trying to do is. So a lot of people have a habit of running on a track straight down the track. The problem is the track is round. So why aren't you turning? Why are you not hitting the finish line? Because you do not know what the goal is. So like I said, some people are very good at product creation. How do you sell that product is what you need to understand. So there is a skill set required for entrepreneurs to say, I can be a good seller. And I've had, guys who've come up to me, friends of mine have come up to me and said, this is my business, this is what I'm going to take and do. And I was like, how will you sell it? It sounds great to you. But when he or she is going to ask you 15 questions, how will you sell it? There's another a challenge to that. People find it very hard to ask for money. They can
yes.
sell the product, but when it comes to saying how much will that cost, they start stuttering and stammering. And even though they have a price in mind, if somebody pushes back, they discount very quickly, right? So the value of your product has gone down again. Yes, stressful times are there. And by the way, even after 10 years, there's stressful days. There's no such thing as no stressful days, right? A business is a living entity. It's going to have problems. Okay, you're going to have people problems sometimes. You're going to have client issues. Somebody had, they just variables that you can't control. And it's going to affect people around, everybody. So so for me, what I did not have and I should have had is a good mentor. I didn't go after a mentor. And that was my mistake. I think if you're starting off on a business, you should have a mentor. It's like having a coach. It's very important. You should not hit the gym all by yourself on day one. Okay. If you've never gone to a gym before, you should get somebody to turn around and tell you these are the steps. So I would say starting a business is like going to the gym for the very first time because you haven't been there. Okay. The weight looks easy. You think you can lift 5 pounds or whatever the thing is? Sure, you can. All you have to do is rip one tendon or a ligament, and then you're done. You're just done, right? So that's what happens in a business. A good mentor will help you. He or she will guide you beforehand. They will try and anticipate, okay, your problems, and they will tell you your shortcomings because you need a sounding board who will tell you where you are going wrong. And then you got to drop your ego to make sure you're listening. Okay,
Yeah,
'cause
ego has no place in a startup. Just put it in a suitcase, stick it in the attic, and hide it away the whole time you're there. But that's interesting what you said
absolutely.
about mentors because almost every founder I speak to talks about all the mentors they have. You're the first founder apart from myself. I didn't have a mentor for about 4 years. I think it was 4 or 5 years before I got to the point where I could not carry on unless we went out and spoke to someone who had an idea of what we should be doing and could answer some basic questions for us and help us think about things. But yeah, but
Mm,
like you, I winged it for the first 4 or 5 years,
yep.
and I learned lots of very painful lessons along the way. So mentors are always good. So one of the reasons that I went up to get a mentor was around scale. So obviously you've scaled the business, and as you scale, there are new challenges. So what are some of the things that you need to be thinking about as a founder as you start to truly scale and really grow as a business?
So, there are what I call textbook answers, Charles, and then there's reality. The reality I went through was I realized when I'd reached a certain level and our business grown, the people who got us there could not get us to the next level. They were not ready. They had gotten very comfortable. They liked what they were doing, but they would not push the envelope anymore. And that, when I try to change them and train them and explain to them time and time again, the answer was yes, I can see it. You're absolutely right. But the actions did not change. Okay, now some of these people have been with me for a long period of time, and I have a high degree of respect for them. But at some stage, I had to even cut that cord, right? Because they say people have a ceiling in what they would like to achieve. Everybody wants to grow, but they don't want to change at a certain age because that's how they are. And they feel internally what they're doing is correct. And there's nothing wrong with that. They are correct, but they will not help you grow any further because that's the blockage. Now, again, I said I don't have a product that we manufacture. We create events. So we in the people's business, and our peoples create the event. You got to have that, but you got to have so the one thing that I have is very strong SOP, standard operating procedures. You can't mess with that. The moment you mess with that, you're breaking what's called the fabric that we've created, because the fabric needs to grow now, and you got to get bigger and bigger. But if you're going to stay within that same space, it's not going to go anywhere. So one of the tough decisions for me in the last few years was to let a few people go, because I realized that as much as I could say I love them, they were part of my journey. And I said that, guys, you were part of the journey. You've gotten us to where we are, but now it's time for us to part. Hard decisions, but you got to make that call. Okay, because limitations of people. People do have limitations. Okay, they will hit what's called saturation for them. And as an entity or a business, you got to grow to the next level.
And how do you manage that? So as you grow, I mean, like all businesses, you start out with a small team, like one, two, three, four, and then the kind of the first 10 people through the door are generally when you're in startup mode, they're generally quite early on in their careers and they kind of buy into the culture and they grow with the culture. And then you get to something like 40 or 50 people, and you're at that stage where in order to grow and scale, you need to bring in more senior people
Mm,
possibly with 15, 20, 25 years experience, perhaps not in a startup with a very corporate background, and they come into a business having not understood the culture from the start and with quite a different kind of cultural background from a business point of view, and the opportunity for an enormous clash is if you're not careful is so
yes.
how do you go about managing that and like intertwining the culture that's coming in with the new senior people with the culture that you've already built?
That's tough. That's just true. You're absolutely right, because that's a people's problem now. Okay. People say something in interviews, they have experience over there, and then they come in over here. And yes, their experience can be good. But the one thing that I still believe in is the startup mentality in an organization should never die. That's the pulse for me. It keeps you young and fresh and alive as a team, right? So the moment you say, okay, we can slow down because now we can grow at a different pace, I think that's when all the wheels come off. But you're right. You will have people who would come in with experience, and you want that experience. But the moment you try, and there are two problems there. There are smart people who will come with experience and say, what is your culture like? Let me change and try to fit into your culture, but bring my experience in. And that's called the 4x multiplier for me. Then they got others who will say, no, this is how I've done it. And they're going to try and change our culture, which never works out. And hence, you're going
No.
to have what's called sometimes a revolving door, right? Yeah, and this has happened, believe it or not, on a year in, year out basis. Got some amazing people in who I've known. And I say, this is how we work. Yes, yes, yes. And the moment they walk in the first 15 days, you can say, okay, we have made a massive mistake. That yes is not going to be a no.
It's
Okay.
so
And then you try.
devastating.
It is so
I had
heartbreaking.
people I literally courted for years. I knew them. I'd worked with them in previous businesses. I was like, oh my God, can I get you? I think we're now big enough to be able to afford you. Can I persuade you to come and work? This is going to transform the business. This is so exciting. And then literally within a week, you're like, I have made a terrible, terrible mistake here. This is not going
Yeah.
to work. And they've made huge lifestyle change or, significant career choice to come to join you. And you have this incredibly awkward conversation. But yeah, we've
Yeah.
talked a lot about all the pros and cons. So if you could go back to December the 2nd,
Yeah.
2014, in time, and if you could tell yourself on December the 3rd, one thing that you did not know then, if and so basically say, okay, you don't know this, but trust me, I'm Mohit from the future. Do this one thing, learn this one thing. What's the one thing that you would tell yourself that would have made it an easier, a smoother, a faster growth journey? What would you say to any aspiring founder? Like, do this, pay attention to this one thing other than sales and cash flow management.
No, fair play. And that's a good thing. What happens, the one thing I would have told myself was to slow down the pathway I created for myself to get to where I thought I would get to after year one, which means I hit one too many markets. I should concentrate okay, so I began with a footprint by saying I can conquer A, B, C, D, and E. That was a bad idea. I should concentrate on A and B only. And that would have gotten more of my energy, more of my focus. It would have kept me more grounded and kept me more real. Okay. So the first thing I am going to say, if I could go back, was slow your steps down, run as fast as you're still running, but make sure that you're not trying to boil the ocean overnight. Stick with the pond. The pond is a good place. Okay. And you'll get to the ocean at some stage, but stick with the pond first. Conquer that completely because that will give you insights. It'll give you stability. It'll give you focus. The moment you try to overstretch yourself in the very beginning, that's where the fracture points come in. And the stress that you're talking about, the sleepless nights, that's exactly why it happened in hindsight. But hindsight's a beautiful thing. I will never get to go back over there. But others who may listen to this, hopefully they'll learn that. If you got one, two, three, and four planned out by saying, that's what I want to achieve, stick with one. Stick with one first, get that there. The second will then come in more organically, as opposed to you saying, I can fire four bullets at the same time because your time gets split very quickly. So I had too many markets that I was opening very quickly. I was on a different pathway to prove something, and that spread me very thin.
Okay.
Bad idea.
Fantastic
Bad idea.
advice. We're almost out of time, so one final
Okay.
question. What's the greatest joy of being like we've talked about all the stress, we've talked about the exhausting hours, we've talked about waking up every day and it's just a new set of problems you've got to deal with. What's the
Hmm.
greatest joy for you of being a founder?
It's listening to our customers, and we get this a lot, Charles. So we're quite lucky. We get testimonials after everything we do, and it's reading the testimonials and sitting down with the customers and even the attendees and asking them for a feedback. So what's very cool is we have a QR code that's called a happiness form. Okay, so we ask you to scan that, and or I say it could be a sadness form, guys, and depending on how your experience was. And reading and talking to them post event every time, it's a massive high because it shows Our purpose is still there. We are achieving what we set out to do. People are loving what the team is doing. People are loving the kind of attention that the team gives them, which then tells me I'm doing something very correct because the more they praise my team, that means the job is being done at every level, not my level. Okay. And that's my biggest high. Yes, I love the content side. I love what I do because for me, that's a passion. It's not work at all. But when that uh, transfers to what my team is doing, and that's what the customers are saying, that's a big tick box.
That's fascinating. I think every founder I talk to says the same thing in some shape, way, or form. It's that pride in what you've built. You've built something with your team that your customers think is absolutely fantastic. And that's if you can just do that, then everything else will eventually sort itself out and go in the right direction. But we're out of time. Mohit, thank you so much for joining us. It was absolutely fascinating. I'd love to chat more, but thank you very much and look forward to talking again soon.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks for having me once again.
For all our listeners, if you'd like to hear more podcasts on how to bootstrap, or if you want to access all our bootstrapping resources and playbooks, then just go to our website, www.bootstrapconfidential.com, for free registration.